On October 20th, 2010, Super Meat Boy released for the Xbox 360, and a month later to the PC, to wild acclaim. The game was an homage to Thousands-era Newgrounds and Flash platformers that took pride in killing players thousands of times. Super Meat Boy took these masochistic ideas and combined them with the scope of a full console release, as well as some of the best feeling controls in a platformer of all time. Meat Boy is not only an extremely fast character who's still able to stop on a dime, but also has an extremely floaty jump, allowing players insane precision while in the air. These mechanics gave the player enough control to feel like they always had a chance to win, despite the game's devilishly difficult level design. Thanks to this, the game became one of the most popular speedruns not only of its era, but still today. Through the past decade, hundreds of gamers have taken on the challenge of speedrunning the game with the goal of beating it as fast as possible. Through those years, tons of huge skips and death-defying strats were implemented that made what seemed impossible to be within grasp. This is the story of the players who defied what was thought possible. This is the story of Super Meat Boy any percent. Any percent is a no major glitches category. While in 2014 a way was discovered to beat the game within 5 minutes, the community decided to name that category any percent major glitches, rather than giving the main category the no major glitches moniker at the end that a lot of games do. In order to beat the game, the player must get through 6 total chapters. The first 5 chapters, Forest, Hospital, Salt Factory, Hell, and Rapture, are 20 levels long, but only require the player to beat 17 of those levels to unlock that chapter's boss. Beating the boss then unlocks the following chapter. The 6th and final chapter of any percent, aptly called The End, is only 5 levels long, but requires the player to beat all of the levels before unlocking the final boss, Dr. Fetus. While players had been taking on speedruns of individual levels and sharing their best times on the website Speed Demos Archives since the day the game launched, it took a few months for a player to take on a full any percent run of the game. The first known speedrun of the game took place on February 24th, 2011 by a user named Joe, who would post the video with the title, "This Shit Blows." While this run is largely unoptimized, prioritizing safety over speed and making the type of mistakes you would expect from one of the game's earliest runs, it paved the way for how future runs would be done over the next following months. For each chapter, Joe would do levels 1 through 17 before heading into each of the bosses. When Joe would get to the Rapture boss, Larry, they are able to get their way behind the saw blades to the left of the level instead of staying inbounds and baiting the worms like the game expects. By going behind the saw blades, Joe would be completely safe and just need to wait for all 3 of the worms to jump into the saws while avoiding the maggots they shoot out. One unfortunate thing about Larry, they don't jump every time they possibly can. Instead, the chance of a worm jumping is based on RNG. Only 1 worm is able to jump at a time, with each of those opportunities being referred to as a cycle. As there are 3 worms, the minimum amount of cycles possible is 3. For the RNG, when no worms have died, the odds each worm has to jump is 50%, unless a worm is already jumping, in which case the chance is 0%. Once a worm has already died, the probability that they jump goes down from 50% to 25%. According to the analysis done by mathematician and speedrunner Hambinu, the probability of getting a 3-cycle Larry is 9.2%, with the average cycle length being 7.6. Fortunately, on this run, Joe had great luck getting a 4-cycle Larry. In the first level of End, Joe skips grabbing 2 keys by doing a tight jump off this block, just clearing a saw blade. With this skip, Joe was able to make a 20-second level into a 10-second level. Then, in the final boss, Joe would make their way over a column of saws that attempted to keep the player in constant danger of Dr. Fetus' missiles. Instead, Joe would make their way to the end of the level just to wait on a button opening a trap door for Dr. Fetus eventually to fall in. There's only one issue. The saw blades that Joe just skipped. They're coming right for him. Dr. Fetus isn't gonna fall into the pit before the saws get to him. Luckily, standing on a button actually gives the player full invincibility. It also saves a few seconds as Dr. Fetus falls as soon as possible. Joe would finish the run in 27 minutes flat. While the run certainly wasn't optimized, this run had many impressive moments and would be the general starting point for the game's route. A few days after Joe's 27-minute run, a runner by the name of Baron Haynes would upload a PB of their own. Baron's run would do the same level route and many of the same strategies compared to Joe's run, with some notable differences. In Rapture level 14 King Carry On, Baron would skip grabbing 2 keys by climbing the wall to the right of the level and making a tight jump to get to the side of a platform, positioning just right to be able to make a wall jump. This allowed Baron to beat the level in 13 seconds rather than just 25. In Rapture level 16 Rot Gut, Baron would do a wall jump on the one-tiled block, allowing Meat Boy to pass through the 2 repulsors and clear the level in only 5 seconds. This was a strat Joe did go for in their run, but missed it. Baron would get slightly worse Larry luck than Joe, clocking in at a 6 cycle, but would still enter the end both on world record and sub 25 pace. Baron would take a 10-second death on 6-1, but would get through the rest of the end unscathed. Baron would enter Dr. Fetus at low 24 pace, but unfortunately would take a couple deaths on the escape section, losing a lot of time. To finish out the run, Baron would implement a big time save using a dev exit that was inadvertently left in the game to trigger the credits. All Baron had to do was do a wall jump into the empty space to the left of the level, and the game ends. This saves upwards of 10 seconds on the intended method. Baron would end the run with a 24:52, still more than 2 minutes faster than Joe's run just days before. But Baron wasn't done yet. Over the next few weeks, Baron would lower his PB significantly. On March 13th, Baron would PB twice, getting a 24:39, then immediately beating that by over a minute with a 23:37. 4 days later, on March 17th, Baron would take that time down by nearly another minute with a 22:42. While this time was certainly impressive, a lot of the strategies used were still quite a bit slower than the individual level counterparts. Over the next coming months, Baron, Joe, and many other speedrunners would look to take IL strategies and make them consistent enough to use in any percent. One thing runners noticed is that the level routes used for 2 of the chapters were suboptimal. In Forest, it was found that it was a second faster to skip 1-15 and instead play 1-18. While some time would be lost exiting back to the level select, 1-18 was only 2 seconds long, making the detour worth it. Exiting back to the level select map was also implemented twice in Hell, as runners found it fastest to skip 4-2 along with 4-18, which saved a couple seconds over the 1-17 route used previously. With a new route and a plethora of new strats, on July 21st, 2011, Baron Haynes would post on Speed Demos Archive that they achieved a new PB of 21:50, but were unsure if they wanted to upload their PB as they were not satisfied with the amount of mistakes they made. Luckily, the very next day, Baron would upload a new world record. The run was extraordinarily clean, really showing off the dedicated practice Baron had put into getting these level times down. Not only were a large number of strategies faster than their 22:42, but the execution overall was much more fluid and consistent. Baron would take his first death during Larry trying to get behind the saws, but the death would still net him perfect Larry RNG, getting a 3 cycle and putting him on pace for a 20-minute time. Baron would go deathless through the 5 end levels and get to the end of the Fetus fight unscathed. All Baron had to do now was the escape section. Unfortunately, Baron would take 3 deaths on escape, killing the 20xx pace. The run was still phenomenal overall, setting world record by 31 seconds and proving that a 20-minute time wasn't just more than possible, it was inevitable. Baron's world record would go uncontested for 2 months until September 21st, when another Speed Demos Archive user would upload a PB of their own. Their run claimed to beat the world record time by over a minute, claiming a 20-minute 10-second time. The strategy used were mostly the same as Baron's world record run, so where did that minute come from? Well, there were 0 major mistakes. Larry was a 4 cycle, and the level of consistency was almost unthinkable for the time. Less than a month later, on October 10th, 2011, the same user would upload another run claiming a 1924. This run did implement a lot of new strategies from individual level speedruns into the route, crediting runners like Baron, Breakdown, and Cade in their PB post. Most notably, an incredibly risky strat from Salt Factory level Mana was added, saving about 3 seconds. Overall, the run blew away the type of strats ever seen before in a Super Meat Boy any percent run. That run would stand claiming to be a world record for 10 months until August 21st, 2012, when the same user would upload possibly the most notorious run in Super Meat Boy speedrunning history. The run posted was in 1839. The run was incredibly clean execution-wise, with very few even minor mistakes. The run would implement even more incredibly risky strategies, such as the Hell Level 4 strat, Hex Skip, which requires the player to jump at the bottom few pixels of this platform and do a tap jump so quick that Meat Boy gains practically no height. Finishing the run with the 3-cycle Larry, the run was looked at as possibly the perfect Super Meat Boy speedrun. How was this runner so far ahead of everyone else? How was he able to get such flawless runs while everyone else was minutes behind? Unfortunately, this has a very simple answer. All of their runs were spliced. Let's fast forward to the year 2017. A different runner had uploaded a PB claiming to be second place, PBing by more than 40 seconds. Moderators were searching for any sort of tell that the run was spliced. After a few days of searching, the moderators were not only able to confirm that that run was spliced, but discover a way to easily detect splicing. Whenever the game saves, which would be every time you complete a level, an animation of Bandage Girl appears at the bottom of the screen. The animation features Bandage Girl putting her arms down for 20 frames, then up for 20 frames, and repeating. The save animation can get cut off mid-animation, but will always pick up where it left off. So if the animation is cut off after 15 frames in the up position, the next time the animation appears, it will start with 5 frames up. Also, the first time the animation starts, it will always start with Bandage Girl's arms being down for 20 frames. When the moderators were testing whether or not this was indeed accurate, they decided to go through other notable historic runs. In doing this, they discovered that the 1839 was spliced after each chapter, putting the best chapter times they could until they got the time they wanted. And not only was the 1839 spliced, each of their runs they had posted so far were spliced. Now, normally I wouldn't talk about spliced runs during a video talking about world records, as it's really putting runs on a pedestal it doesn't deserve. There are other runners who spliced runs in this game who were caught and will not be mentioned. However, this run had a major impact on the historical knowledge of the game. Because of this spliced run, there is little existing proof about what the first sub 20 time would be. One of the runs believed to be the first sub 20 is done by a runner named Diglio on April 22nd, 2013. While this run may not actually be the first sub 20, it is the only one with existing proof. This run's notable for being one of the first runs to show just how easy the Hell boss Little Horn truly is. As you can see here, all you need to do is stand in this rough location and jump 3 times, and he will never die. Diglio would not only end the run with a new PB of 1952, but with one of the greatest pop-offs.
Yes! 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 Fucking sub 20! Sub 20! Oh my god!
In mid-2013, the speedrunner Vorpal would start putting up insane times. On July 10th, 2013, coming in with a PB of 20 minutes and 8 seconds, Vorpal is looking for their first sub 20 in the game. While the run might not have gone for many of the more advanced strats known like Mono Skip or Hex Skip, the run generally do most of the fastest known strategies, with very solid execution. On the Chapter 2 boss, Chad, Vorpal implemented a fast key grab, saving upwards of 8 seconds. Normally, this boss would stop in the middle of the level and go back and forth across the screen, hoping to clip the player as they try to grab the key. However, with a well-timed jump right here, making sure you don't go too far off screen and dying, you can skip this cycle, making the screen never stop scrolling up. The runner would get a 4-cycle Larry, and after a flawless end, Vorpal would get his first sub 20 and world record with 1934. This world record would be one of many Vorpal would get in the game. 2 months later, on September 11th, 2013, Vorpal would PB again by 8 seconds, getting a 1926. Vorpal entered Larry on his best pace ever and would get some help with a 4-cycle. Less than a week later, on September 17th, Vorpal would PB yet again. Using some upgraded strats compared to his 1926 and better overall execution, with a deathless Rapture for the first time since they started running the game. Unfortunately, Larry would lose him more than 15 seconds with a 7th cycle, but with some new and improved strats, that wouldn't come close to killing the run. On the last level of End, Omega, Vorpal would implement a strat called Key Skip. Normally the level expects you to go into this room and grab a key. Instead, Vorpal runs off this platform, sprintless, then represses sprint at just the right time midair to be able to make a tight jump off the platform. This strat saves roughly 3 seconds over grabbing the key. Thanks to this and the better overall execution, Vorpal would end this run with a 1912. A couple months later, on November 5th, 2013, Vorpal would world record yet again with a 1909. Vorpal would add some new strats to Rapture, like the strat on 5-2, where Meat Boy makes a tight jump off this wall and uses a repulsor to shoot him back to the right to save a little less than a second. While Sub 19 was knocking at the door, little did anyone know the game was about to get blown wide open. On November 13th, 2013, a speedrunner Control-Alt-Delicious would upload a video showing the biggest skip found in the game to date. This strategy showed a way to skip a major part of the Chapter 3 boss, Brownie. This boss normally had you do a scripted race against Brownie, featuring 30 seconds of tight platforming, making this one of the only bosses that wasn't tied to auto-scrolling or RNG in some way. Instead, in this video, Control-Delicious showed that with a precise enough jump, you could go to the right at the start of the level and climb the wall and trigger the end of the boss without doing the race. Now, on the Xbox 360 version, which is not used for speedruns as the load times are much slower, it was found this is possible with just a normal jump. But on the PC version, a normal jump would kill the player, as there are minor differences between the two versions. The way to make this strategy consistent is something called a sprint jump. No, this isn't a jump where you hold sprint. Instead, right before you do a wall jump, you let go of the sprint button. Immediately after jumping, you repress sprint. This affects Meat Boy's velocity in a way that keeps him closer to the wall and just narrowly outside the kill box at the edge of the level. Sprint jumps are a technique that's actually used all across Meat Boy runs, as they save a bit of time when climbing walls. But this is the one moment in any percent where it is truly necessary. This strategy saves about 20 seconds, meaning the race for the first Sub 19 was officially on. Just 2 days after Brownie Skip was discovered, on November 15th, 2013, a runner by the name of Mattisticus was grinding, hoping to become the first player in the world to Sub 19 the game. Coming in with a PB of 19 minutes and 11 seconds without Brownie Skip, they just needed a run with similar execution and good RNG, and the Sub 19 was theirs. After getting Brownie Skip, Mattisticus would be at minus 15 compared to his PB, and just needed to keep the same pace as their PB, and the world's first Sub 19 would be theirs. A clean hell would only lose about a second. Then, after a mostly clean Rapture, Larry decided to make things interesting, giving Mattisticus a 5 cycle, putting the pace at a minus 9 compared to PB. They needed to make up 3 seconds in End to pull it off. Luckily, there was a bit of time save in End, but after a rough 6-1, it was looking extremely close. The rest of End would be performed cleanly, and Mattisticus just needed to finish it off to get the world's first Sub 19. Mattisticus would end the run with an 1859, just narrowly squeezing out the world's first Sub 19 any percent. While Sub 19 was a huge hurdle, the community also had their eyes on beating the cheated 1839 time that was still believed to be real. And the game was being grinded by players like never before, trying to be the first person to beat the time. On November 20th, 2013, Vorpal would return with another great pace. The execution was similar to his 1909 run, but thanks to Brownie Skip and a 4-cycle Larry, Vorpal would exit Rapture at minus 17 compared to his PB, which was 1850 pace. Vorpal decided to take the End relatively safe, opting out of going for keyless in Omega and taking the End of Escape safer than normal to ensure PB. The run would end at an 1853, beating Mattisticus' time by 6 seconds. Sometime over the next few days, Vorpal would also get an 1850, knocking down his world record by 3 seconds. A few days after that, on December 2nd, 2013, Vorpal would be on the pace of a lifetime. Not only was Vorpal deathless going into Larry, but there were no major mistakes. Larry would also bless the run with perfect RNG, the fabled 3-cycle, putting Vorpal on a pace that could potentially get a time in the 1820s. After great execution for the first 4 levels, Vorpal again decided against going for Keyless Omega, deciding beating the 1839 was the goal over the optimal time. Then, this happened.
No! Fuck.
This death, the first death of the run, would lose Vorpal roughly 13 seconds, killing the chance at an 1830 time. But the run was still absolutely phenomenal, getting an 1843. While Vorpal was close to being the first to beat the 1839 time, other runners were right there with him. The French runner Savlo was also putting up great times with great consistency. On December 5th, 2013, Savlo would come in with a PB of 1847 and would be on another great pace. The run was deathless with no major mistakes going to Larry, where Savlo would be greeted by a 4-cycle. After a clean end, Savlo would set the world record with 1941. The very next day, on December 6th, 2013, Vorpal would be on yet another fantastic pace. Vorpal had recently added some new tech to his run so that he could get the 3-second time save of Mono Skip into his run. That tech is called Auto Jump. Auto Jump is a technique that makes the game essentially auto-fire jump, making Meat Boy jump on every single frame. Auto Jump is triggered by holding jump and pausing the game, then let go of jump and unpause. While Auto Jump had been known since close to release, many runners didn't want to use it as they felt it was somewhat cheap. But Auto Jump did allow for strats like Mono and many others that would otherwise be incredibly precise, and now were much more manageable. Vorpal would get a 3-cycle Larry and was on pace for the 1830. After a flawless end and no death on Dr. Fetus, Vorpal would get the time everyone was pushing for with an 1830 flat. Sometime shortly after that, another runner who was chasing top times put up a world record of their own, an Australian runner named Zakoza. While no video of this time exists, they were able to get an 1824, starting the chase for the first sub-18. On June 6, 2014, Vorpal would return trying to take back world record yet again. And with it were a plethora of new strats using auto jump and a new route in Salt Factory. A strat was implemented in Salt Factory level 18 named Grundle that was able to use auto jump to make an extremely tight jump off the disappearing lock blocks and turn the 13-second level into a 7-second level. This made it faster to skip 3-12 and 13, 2 auto-scroller levels, and replace them with 3, 18, and 19, which saves about 3 seconds. Auto jump also made Chad skip a tad faster than the old strat, using him to jump off of those disappearing lock blocks. Vorpal would also implement Hex Skip and Keyless Omega into their run. Thanks to these new strats and a 3-cycle Larry, Vorpal would end the run with an 1817. On August 15th, 2014, Zakuza would return with another world record of 1809. While video of proof of this run technically exists, it's in the small video comparison of their stream layout from a future PB. Unfortunately, there's not much that can be discerned from this run, but what we do know is what gave Zakoza the edge in this run was mainly execution. While there are plenty of skips in Super Meat Boy, over the years most of the time save has mostly been level optimizations, which save half seconds, tenths of seconds, or less, and accumulating those over the 85 levels. Just 2 days later, Zakuza would enter Rapture on a potentially sub-18 pace. Great execution meant that as long as he got a 3 cycle, the sub 18 was possible. Larry would give the rarest type of 3 cycle, with 2 worms jumping on the 3rd cycle. Unfortunately, the nerves got to Zakoza. Sloppy play in the end would lose him about 6 seconds in end, and the sub 18 was dead. However, they still achieved world record by 7 seconds with the 18:02. This would stand as the best time for 4 months until January 1st, 2015, when Vorpal would yet again return to get this game's first ever sub 18. Unfortunately, video of this run was lost by Twitch. On July 2nd, 2015, Vorpal would put up yet another run. One major addition to this run over others was the usage of the keyboard A and S keys. Normally after beating a level, the game shows a replay screen of the level you just completed, showing off all of your failed and your one successful attempt. Speedrunners previously had to double tap through this, which would take a few frames each level. The keyboard A, however, allowed speedrunners to skip the replay screen entirely and go to the next level, while the S key allowed you to skip the replay screen and go back to map. While this may not seem like a ton of time save, through 85 levels, the time really adds up. This run would take a death on 4-1, which would lose about 5 seconds, and there were a few other mistakes losing tiny amounts of time, but other than that, the execution for this run was like nothing ever seen before in Super Meat Boy. The run would end at a 17:43, a time that would stand as world record for more than a year, the first time that happened in the game's history. In late 2016, the French runner and mathematician Hambanu was trying to put their mark in any percent history. Hambanu was a former world record holder in the 106 category and had gotten a sub 18 of their own in early 2015. Hambanu would cut their PB time down fast. Hambanu had elite consistency and went for most of the fastest known strategies at the time. One strat that he used trying to bring him over the edge was the strat for Hell Level 7 Rickets. This strat requires 2 incredibly precise jumps between a saw blade and a wall, as well as an incredibly fast middle section. It's safe to say this is one of the hardest strats in Super Meat Boy speedrunning. On December 28, 2016, Hambanu would post a 17:51 utilizing double rickets. 2 days later, Hambanu would PB yet again with a 17:48. Hambanu had the strats, he just needed to limit mistakes and get the right RNG, and the world record would be his. On January 7th, 2017, Hambanu would take yet another great pace into hell. He would take an unfortunate death on double rickets and decided to do the normal strat on his second playthrough of the level. The rest of the run was executed extremely cleanly, making minimal mistakes, putting him at -10 going into Larry. Larry, unfortunately, would not be too kind, giving Hambanu a 5 cycle. This would only lose him 3 seconds compared to his PB. He would still stand at a -7, which was still world record pace. After a tremendous end, Hambanu would claim world record, putting up a time of 17:41. A few months later, another challenger came in to fight for the any percent record, Mate. Not only had Mate already made a name for himself in other categories, he was the world record holder of the other 2 major categories in the game, 106 and Dark Ending. Any percent was the only record standing in the way of a clean sweep. Mate had a 17:58. He did knock off 18 seconds to claim the record. In his grind for the record, Mate added a very notable strat on 3-7, Mind the Gap. The strat utilized a technique called a slide, which essentially makes Meat Boy act as if he jumped off the ground instead of a wall, which gives him a lot more vertical speed than normal. Combine that with a conveyor on the level, and you can quickly launch yourself to the end. The issue? Well, it requires a frame-perfect jump off the wall. The strategy saves over a second compared to the previous strategy used by top runners, which may not seem like a lot of time, but the game had already been optimized so much that any strategy that saved more than a few tenths of a second were few and far between. Mate was hoping that this, along with other level optimizations, could get him the record. On September 9th, Matte would get a 1750 that included 5 deaths, but nailing 3-7 and getting a 3-cycle Larry. It was clear Matte had the strats to get the record. It seemed it was mostly a matter of limiting mistakes. On October 4th, Matte would get another great pace run. Matte would go into Larry on a pace that could gold Rapture and potentially put him at -9 to his PB splits, which would essentially be tied with world record pace. Unfortunately, Larry would not be too kind. Larry would take 5 longer than normal cycles, destroying the world record potential. The run would still go into PB by a second, giving him a 1749, 8 seconds off the record. Later the same stream, Matte would get a run with an extremely hot start, but a 6-cycle Larry would kill the world record potential yet again. Matte would finish the run with an exceptional end, getting a PB of a second yet again. After getting 2 PBs in a single stream, both world record pace into Larry, it wasn't a matter of if Matte could get the execution to get a world record, it was the matter of when Larry would give him the RNG needed to get it. Matte would continue to grind over the next few days. Then, on October 9th, 2017, Matte would be on a rather average run. A sloppy hospital would put him at +4 out of hospital. And even despite getting the slide on 3-7, would lose a small amount of time in Salt Factory being +5. Over the next few splits, Matte had over 20 seconds of time saved compared to Gold's. The hell was extremely well executed, gaining him back 8.5 seconds to go to -3. The Rapture would also be extremely strong and put him on world record pace into Larry yet again. Would this finally be the run where he would get a good Larry? Fortunately, it was. A 3-cycle Larry would put Matte on a -12 pace. Just 5 levels and the 2 boss levels stood in his way. Matte would PB by 11 seconds, setting a new world record, 1737. Matte's world record would stand for over a year. While runners like Fingerboom would attempt to break the record, they weren't able to put a run that had both the execution and RNG able to pull off a run better than a 1749. In late 2018, Vorpal would return to the game. Vorpal had recently derusted for a community relay and got a couple 17-minute runs where he knew there was plenty of time to save. This motivated Vorpal to get back into any percent. Between his 1743 and now, Vorpal had put up several dark ending world records, but hadn't grinded any percent since. On November 12, 2018, Vorpal would be on one of many great paced runs that he would have. While Vorpal was -5 out of hospital, he would miss Grundle Skip and Salt Factory, putting him back on the same PB pace. While Vorpal would take short deaths on 4-4 and 4-14, overall, the execution at the end of his run was extremely solid. Thanks to a 3-cycle Larry, this run would exit -1.5 to PB. While Vorpal has about 5 seconds of time save and end, he would need to have one of the best ends ever played before if he wanted to world record. And that's exactly what he did. Thanks to this end, Vorpal would get a 1735, a 2-second world record, and yet another world record for him. Vorpal's run was just what Matte needed to start running any percent again. While Matte's 1737 was absolutely blistering, there were still plenty of time saves left in the run. Matte would add riskier strats like double rickets, as well as several smaller optimizations throughout the run to try to claim the game's first 17-minute 20-second time. Matte would get several great paces, but 3-cycle Larrys were more important than ever in the game, as a 4-second time loss is essentially an eternity. On December 4th, 2018, Matte would be on one of the best paces the game has ever seen. While the run did have a single death, the execution was insane. Combine that with 3-cycle Larry, and the run would finish with a 1728. Fast forward to February 2nd, 2019, when an interesting technique was found with Larry. While unfortunately it wasn't the fabled full RNG manipulation, it is the next best thing. Matte would post a video showing Larry completed in 1 cycle. How is this even possible? Well, it's complicated. First off, the game has a glitch where if you pause the game and click exit game, then back out in the verify screen, there will be some background items that will continue as if the game had unpaused. For Larry, it will allow the worm to begin to jump while the game is still paused. By itself, this doesn't actually save time. However, you can pause at a time where you only have 1 or 2 worms that are prepping to jump. If you do this menuing manipulation when that happens, those worms will decide if they want to jump. But what about that other worm? Luckily, that worm acts as if the other 2 don't even exist. While normally 1 worm can jump at a time, this manipulation tricks the worm into acting independently. On top of this, on the first cycle there's a 50% chance that a worm jumps, increasing the overall probability that you get a low number of cycles. Confusing enough for you? Yeah, sorry about that. Really, all you need to know is that runners would now be going for a 2-cycle Larry, which would save about 3 seconds, and the overall odds of getting a 3-cycle or less drastically increased. While a 1-cycle is possible, it's very difficult to get and generally doesn't save time. On March 24th, 2019, Matte was continuing his grind of any percent, looking for potentially getting a time in the 1710s. In this run, Matte had made a number of costly mistakes in Salt Factory, which put him more than 8 seconds behind out of Salt Factory, a pace that many runners would have just reset, but fortunately, he didn't, and the end of this run is the stuff for legends. A nearly flawless hell would get him back 3 seconds, and Rapture was similarly well executed. And then, Larry. The 2-cycle Larry helped take a run that was once more than 8 seconds behind and put it on even pace with world record. Matte's end would be similarly nearly flawless, and would end the run with a 17:27. The run would stand for the longest an any percent world record has ever stood. Enter a familiar name yet again. Once again, Vorpal was grinding Super Meat Boy any percent. On July 18th, 2020, Vorpal would get his first PB in over a year, posting a 17:34. Then, in the very same stream, Vorpal would put up a 17:29, just 2 seconds off world record. 1 month later, Vorpal would be on a -5 run out of hell. Unfortunately, a death at the beginning of 5-2 would take away the deathless stream, but after a 3-cycle Larry, Vorpal would find himself in a familiar place: world record pace. He just needed a perfect end. Unfortunately, 2 very minor mistakes cost Vorpal precious time, but the run would come down to the wire. Vorpal would get a 17:27, but when retime compared to Matte's time, it was found that it was a little bit more than a half second slower than Matte's 17:27. And that is where the leaderboard stands today. It's the closest the top 2 times have ever been to each other, and Matte's 17:27 is the longest standing any percent world record the game has ever seen. When will the next world record happen, and who will take it? Will it be another familiar face like Matte or Vorpal, or will it be a new one? Only time will tell. Before I sign off, I'd like to give a big thanks to Vorpal and Baq for their help in making this video, along with the entire Super Meat Boy community. Thanks everyone for watching.